This is a very simple demo here. I have some content on the page, and when I click delete, I get this overlay where I can confirm or cancel. Now, both buttons don't do anything but close that overlay, as does clicking that backdrop. But what you see on this page here, or what happens when we click delete, all of that is controlled with JavaScript. I got a HTML file with some very basic HTML content, some styling, which we can ignore, and then the magic happens in this app.js file. In there, I got some code that in the end adds a listener to this main button which we got on the screen, so to this delete button here. And when that button is clicked, I fire this show modal handler function, and in there we run a bunch of JavaScript code to create various elements, divs, paragraphs, and then the cancel and confirm buttons to configure those elements and add text or CSS classes, and to add event listeners to those elements as well, to then fire that close modal handler function, which in the end removes the overlay, this modal as we call it. And then still in the show modal handler function, I got some code that combines all because we would have multiple delete buttons for multiple to-dos, and we would have to make sure that for different to-dos, different overlays are opened, and when we confirm the deletion, the correct to-do is deleted. We're not even doing that here in this demo, but that would be more complexity which we have to add and handle if we build a more realistic app here, a more realistic website. And therefore, just JavaScript works and can sometimes be a good choice, but it can also reach its limits. And one of the reasons is that with just JavaScript, you have to write every single step that should be taken. We want to create an element. We want to set its content. We want to add classes. We want to add a click listener. Then what should happen on that click listener? Every single step needs to be described. This way of programming and bringing something onto the screen is called an imperative approach. We simply describe action after action, step after step. And that can reach its limits. And in addition, even if we don't reach any limits, we as a developer have to take care about all the nitty-gritty details. We have to run the low-level code for creating a button, for setting its text. Is the main code that's responsible for bringing this to-do onto the screen. And what's very interesting here is that we have like a custom HTML component here, a custom HTML element. And indeed, React is all about those components. React is all about splitting your application into small building blocks, small components, where every building block, every component has a clear task, and therefore your code stays maintainable and manageable, and React, the library, will do the heavy lifting of rendering something on the screen and of combining all your code. So for example, if we look into the code for this custom element which we built here, which lives in this to-do.js file, then we here again see that I have some HTML code for rendering a to-do, but that we have some kind of placeholder in here, and then some kind of other code which we don't fully understand yet, but which we will understand and learn about throughout this course. And in the end, that's the code responsible for rendering such a to-do, and for rendering the modal, this overlay here, as well, and for rendering it conditionally. And what's interesting here is that even though we don't understand this code yet, and even though it's certainly strange that we have HTML code in JavaScript files, even though that's all weird, we can definitely see that we don't have a bunch of step-by-step instructions here. Instead, we kind of define what we want to have as an end result, and then we have some placeholders, some flexible elements there. And then we have very simple instructions here, which in the end then will be processed by React to change what's visible on the screen. And all these low-level instructions for creating elements and setting text content and so on, those instructions are not written by us when using React. Instead, they will be written or defined, if you want to call it like this, by the React library. We as a React developer work on a higher level, which makes working with React and which makes building complex user interfaces way easier. And that is why we want to use React.js. It makes building modern, rich, complex user interfaces easier, and it does so by giving us a higher level syntax where we write code in a declarative way, in a declarative component focused way. We define what we want to have on the screen, what the end goal is. We create these custom HTML elements, and React will do the rest. And one side effect, for example, is that if we wanted more than one to do, we could just copy that custom element, change maybe that text, that configuration, and boom, we got a second to do here. And we got a button on that to do which works as well. And that is why we use technologies or frameworks like React.